welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest, and I live here in Austin, Texas. I've had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972, and very grateful for that. We are in hopefully the final stages of climbing a very long ladder. It's titled The 12-Step Ladder to God Consciousness, and we thought this was going to be a one or two episode thing with my guest, Matt D. from All Addicts Anonymous. And we've just found a lot to talk about going through this little article. The article is in the show notes, so I'd encourage you to take a look at it, read it. If you're just joining this thing for the first time, you might want to go back to the beginning so it makes a little more sense. We're getting close to the top of the ladder here. So, Matt, welcome back. It's always nice to spend time with you.
Yeah, glad to be back. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, well, let's just dig right in. Maybe we can finish up today. That would be my plan, but perhaps God has others, so we'll see what happens.
We plan, God laughs.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm on page 6 of a 7-page document. He's talking about some aspects of the 12-step program that's really needs to be paid attention to. So let me just read. And Matt, you can relax. Go feed the chickens because I got a fair amount of reading to do here for for a minute or two. All right. So
I'll be back.
Let me get started. Another camouflaged aspect of the steps is the permissive way in which they are presented. The 10-step ladder of Moses, a high one indeed, was given to Israel in the form of commandments. What the Hebrew children were told was, do these things, period. The 12 steps are put forth as suggestions. That is a big step back from do them or else, and a big step in the direction of do what you like. Bill describes the process by which this soft sell approach was arrived at. And this is coming from AA Comes of Age. Just before the manuscript was finished, an event of great significance for our future took place. At the time, it looked like just another battle over the book. The scene was Henry's office in Newark, where most of the writing had been done. Present were Fitz, Henry, our great little secretary Ruth, and myself. We were still arguing about the 12 steps. All this time I had refused to budge on these steps. I would not change a word of the original draft, in which you will remember I had consistently used the word God, and in one place the expression on our knees was used. Praying to God on one's knees was still a big affront to Henry. He argued, he begged, he threatened. He quoted Jimmy to back him up. He was positive we would scare off the alcoholics by the thousands when they read those 12 steps. Little by little, both Fritz and Ruth came to see merit in his contentions. Though at first I would have none of it, we finally began to talk about the possibility of compromise. Who first suggested the actual compromise words, I do not know, but they are words well known throughout the length and breadth of AA today. In step 2, we decided to describe God as a power greater than ourselves. In steps 3 and 11, we inserted the words, God as we understood him. From steps 7, we deleted the expression on our knees. And as a lead-in sentence to all the steps, we wrote these words. Here are the steps we took which are suggested as a program of recovery. AA's 12 steps were to be suggestions only. Such were the final concessions. To those of little or no faith, this was the great contribution of our atheists and agnostics. They had widened our gateway. They had widened our gateway so that all who suffer might pass through, regardless of their belief or lack of belief. God was certainly there in our steps, but he was now expressed in terms that anybody at all, could accept and try. Countless AAs have since testified that without this great evidence of liberality, they would never have set foot on any of this or made any of the spiritual progress or even approached us in the first place. It was another one of those providential 10 strikes. Some pluses and some minuses, huh?
Yeah. We talked about this before.
We talked about everything before,
Yeah,
Matt,
we
so don't
have.
let that bother you.
I know. I keep.
We went back to sleep, so, I mean...
It's good. We have to be constantly reminded of
That's
these
right.
things.
Remind ourselves of that, yeah.
But just this kind of divine tension between two facets inside the evolution of the AA program. We have this, I don't mean any of these in political terms, but you have this conservative aspect coming out of Akron, Chicago, Cleveland. You have this more libertarian streak, if you will, coming out of New York, and it is the tension between these two things that actually, again, I call it divine because I think it was providential. It was supposed to be that way.
Yeah.
If you went with straight Akron, and there's people who are very sympathetic to it, I happen to be in certain ways, you would have ended up with no book. You may have ended up being hitched to a Christian sect in a certain way or something. This thing probably would have gone very far, not very far at all. If you had gone with New York, it probably would have just petered out into C.S. Lewis's, tapioca in the sky. It would have just become very possibly very nothing as well. It would have just been a continual dilution until there was almost nothing left. And I think you have this kind of tension between the two. And of course, Bill is caught in the middle of this tension, given this spiritual job, if you will, to carry this message in this fairly large way, and his spiritual experiences backing it up, and the whole thing. In the middle of that tension, this kind of decision is made that will allow more people to be able to enter in. It certainly does widen the gate.
Right.
I'm referring specifically to the suggestions only aspect of the 12 steps. And mind you, if you read the 12 steps in the big book, and we've boiled them down in AAA and called them the 10 points, the language of the 10 points does not reflect a suggestions only term. It's saying no half measures and completely give yourself to this thing. It is not the language of, take this thing as a suggestion. So it's interesting that this was incorporated later on. But this widening comes with, as he'll say, here's a corresponding loss. And the loss is that it is a certain kind of liberty that the individual must have to elect for himself the kind of program, that the strength of the program that he needs. You could do this way now, however you want, and what that does, it leaves a huge spiritual responsibility up to the individual to elect for himself what he needs. You could choose a watered down version. You could choose the full thing. This is a fact for each individual anyway. Each person has to decide for themselves how they're going to do it, right? So that hasn't changed.
Yeah, there is a certain defiance and stubbornness on the part of the many alcoholics and addicts coming in. They don't want to be told what to do.
Oh, yeah.
So it appeals, and yet it appeals at a price.
It does.
That's the message.
And I think that's Bill Wilson's genius, is that he has, being so cynical, and I think he spiritually cynical coming into this thing, and then having this profound, intense spiritual experience. He comes back out of that experience with a deep appreciation for the person who is incapable of handling a too large of a spiritual dose of anything. Like Tom gives that description, saying that it's like trying to give medicine to a dying child. You're like, please take this medicine. Like, you don't want to rough that child up because they're at such a vulnerable position.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like he sees these individuals psychologically,
yes,
as, we do not want to rough these people up unnecessarily. And he's got a great compassion for that individual, that type. I would say that the aspect of the more conservative thing is sometimes it lacks that kind of consideration. Dr. Bob ran things with I'll say Dr. Bob was a kind of very interesting. He did learn how to ride this thing down the middle as well, and I think that's why he
In
was
time.
AA's other co-founder.
Yeah.
So you get some guy comes to the door, and everybody's like, "We can't let this guy in," and he says, "What would the master do?"
Right.
But out of that more conservative aspect, it's harsh and it has to be in a certain way. And thank God, on Wilson's end, he's got this great compassion for the person who is unable to stomach the God thing at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful way these things all came together and worked out.
Yeah, providential is the right word. It's the balance, and you can't but notice that when you're reading the big book. It's that combination of you must, we had to, and coupled with, well, if you want to, these are only suggestions, guys. It kind of knocks you back and forth.
What's the story? I'm sure you've heard it where the the guy's learning he's in the army or whatever and learning or how to jump out of the airplane or whatever, and they go up and the director, whoever's, showing them, you come to the edge of the plane, you open the hatch door, you jump out, you count to 10, you pull the rip cord, the parachute cord, after you count to 10. But that last part's just a suggestion, you know. And that's kind of how we're supposed to elect our relationship to how we're going to do this thing. Like, yeah, it's a suggestion, but you're supposed to take this thing as a suggestion, like pulling that parachute cord. If
Right.
you don't take the suggestion as binding, you could kill yourself.
The analogy I've used over the years is like a funnel, that the funnel needs to be wide at the top so you don't spill and lose the new alcoholics. But then it gradually tightens, and that's been my experience. What I could get away with, quote, in the beginning, in the early days, after a while, I couldn't get away with that any longer. Without paying a price, I didn't have to drink, but internally, I could feel an anxiety, a fear, discomfort, and it tightened. It had to tighten over time.
Yes.
So I ran into you.
No, I like that analogy very much,
Mm-hmm.
and it does. The broadness of this thing does serve a great important function, but then from there is a concentration that needs to occur if you're going to keep on the ladder, right? We're going back
Right.
to the ladder. If you're going to keep on the ladder, your access to the ladder, again, this is the genius of Bill Wilson and some others, and the divine aspect that just providentially was worked into this thing is you don't want to put any unnecessary obstacles towards making contact with the ladder. Now, the ladder, and we've talked about this, and the suggestions only part is part of the so-called camouflage. Like it does mean that after you get in, you have to start to develop enough integrity by the help of the program and by contact with God enough, or the truth, if that's what your definition of God may be. You get enough integrity and humility that you do start to have a concentrated program. You do keep on this action. You don't take it as a suggestion. You don't wake up in the morning and be like, "Oh, well, I'm going to do my prayer time. It's just a suggestion. Never mind."
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, back on the ladder. All AA experience supports Bill's view that the compromise version of the steps benefited the fellowship tremendously by opening its doors to a great many alcoholics who would not otherwise have been persuaded to come around. But this gain was not achieved without a corresponding loss. No doubt more people have given the program a try than would otherwise have done so, but far fewer have worked the whole life-giving program that the pioneers drew their strength from. So there we are. The door is wide open. Everybody is welcome. But if you don't work it the way it was intended, a price is going to be paid. That's the tragedy. And we see it all the time.
We do.
We see it all the time.
There is, you walk into a meeting or something and you could see 50 people or something. And if you had some kind of visual decoder ring, if you will, and you could see, where we're at on the ladder, you may be, don't be shocked to find out there's a great portion of the people who've been in there for very many years, on some quite low rungs.
Yeah.
It's an unfortunate aspect of this thing. I think has to do with the nature of man. Why do something that, if you don't feel like you have to? And after time goes on, it's very possible that you come in and the actual higher meaning of what's behind this way of life is lost. And it's not about awakening, and it becomes formal things like meeting attendance and social gatherings and small aspects of doing, a portion of this part of the program and a little portion of it over there. And then the trap that many of us get into, and I'm chief among the violators, if you will, would be myself, is you get into things where it's cyclical. You start to do things, you start to get benefit from it, and then, as we mentioned previously, you start to fall asleep, and then you fall off the ladder. There's some of this. There's a kind of a Russian icon of the ladder of divine ascent, and you see people falling off that ladder because they've fallen asleep. Then you crash, you bash your head one of the rungs on the way down. You wake up, you grab back a hold again, and you just keep going through that process. I'm not saying that's bad. The ladder is also, this fellowship is a safety net when you fall off the ladder.
Right.
And it helps catch you, and then you can get yourself back up, you hope, with God's help, to get back up again. But yeah, here we are.
In AA, there soon grew up a widespread practice of taking the steps cafeteria style, taking what one liked and leaving the rest out. After all, they were only suggestions. Here's how cafeteria style worked. If I happened to like suggestions 1 and 12, fine, I would follow them. If I was not so sure about 2, 3, and 11, I might fudge them for a year or so. And if I just plain didn't go for 4 through 10, I would leave them alone and even argue against them. Turned out that a lot of people could approach the steps this way and stay sober, but it also turned out that a lot of them could not. And even those who were able to maintain sobriety on their personally selected, watered-down versions of the steps were denied the basic promise of the program, which is something far beyond sobriety, namely spiritual awakening. This is the forerunner of the other article that Tom wrote, eh?
Yes, this is just my own thought, but I think that this idea originally came to Tom Power Sr. through Dr. Silkworth, and maybe this is kind of a stretch, but when Tom was two-stepping it, if you will, and was not open to any portion of the program that related directly with God, and had something of the psychological program that was mentioned here by both Jimmy and but consequently, Jimmy had himself a spiritual experience, which involved of all things, the Bible, and ended up staying sober ever since. He did fall. He's the one that really helped provide that phrase, God as you understand him, is at least that's the way the story is told. But he himself, several months later, having this kind of psychological only program, if you will, ended up falling on his hindquarters and has this, going through terrible seizures in a Rhode Island hotel, reaches out to, and touches the Bible in the middle of the night and has a conversion experience and never drinks again. There has been the development of a kind of psychological program, which we entitled kind of Weak AA. We had made mention previously that a couple years after this article, Tom Jr., who also wrote this, wrote Gresham's Law and Alcoholics Anonymous. Gresham's Law, it's an actual economic law that bad currency drives out good. So paper money drives out gold, in essence. And weak AA drives out strong AA is kind of the point that is here. The original subtitle to that it showed on the front cover 3 cups of tea, strong, medium, and weak, and it says, "What's your cup of tea?" And that's a reference here of how do you elect for yourself what program you're going to really follow. I'm not saying this is directly coming from Dr. Silkworth, that, one statement he made to Tom many years ago made the creation of the Gresham's Law and Alcoholics Anonymous article. But it was a concept that I first heard appear when Tom was trying to get sober on his psychological program with no God in it, and kept going in and out of these different hospitals with shock treatment and everything else. One of those places was Towns Hospital. Historically, not that this matters in this discussion, but one of the times that he spent in Towns Hospital was with Hank, who we just mentioned earlier. They shared the same room together. He said he learned more about AA history in those two or 3 days that he spent sharing a room with Hank Parkhurst than he ever had. I'm sure that was quite an interesting experience. But anyway, Tom went to him and said, "Look, I'm going to all these meetings. I got Bill Wilson as a sponsor. I've been working with Dr. Bob. I'm going to 4 or 5 meetings a week. I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm not sober. I think I need to go try something else."
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what Silkworth said to him, and it's interesting because in a medical analogy, he just said, "I know of no other thing that works better for the alcoholic than AA. I think what you need is to up your dose, up what you're taking,
right?
Increase the dose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't switch to another quote unquote medication, if you will. Increase the one that you've got. It's all that we know that works." And I think this is a case of saying, hey, try strong AA. Stop doing the weak stuff. It isn't working for you, right? And that experience for him, which he ended up, he had himself a profound spiritual experience in a hospital, very similar to Bill, and comes out a theist and now not barred from practicing all of the steps that he just intellectually could not stomach. He gets sober. Obviously, the development of the AAA program starts to occur because he's now open to looking at some of these other areas of his life, if you will. This is a guy who comes out and finds out that he can't do anything but strong AA.
Yeah.
Like, he's got to have the intense original program, and the communication of that ended up coming out in many places, primarily through his son, and it was here. We see it right here. We see it in Gresham's Law.
Right. I didn't know about the Silkworth connection there. That's very interesting. Let me go on. We must be clear about this. For many of us, the easier, softer way, the cafeteria-style approach, will not work. We need a real ladder, and the 12 steps are a ladder only when practiced faithfully as an organic whole. No amount of effort on any 11 of them can compensate for a failure to work any one of them. So they're all necessary, eh? And to see them as a whole. This was the thing that it was very helpful. I was interviewing a woman who has been in the Oxford group for many years. She was in her 80s or so, had spent her life in the Oxford group, and her parents had been in it. Her grandparents had been. I mean, she was just steeped in this thing. And she was describing the program, and she did it in 3 words. She didn't know about the steps, really, But when I heard her say these 3 words, the light went on for me, and I saw the bigger picture. It was the first 3 steps are connection. The middle number of steps, 6 of them, 4 through 9, are correction. So we connect with God, then we correct everything that's wrong in our relationships with God, with others, and with ourselves, 4 through 9. And then we live direction, 10, 11, and 12. We're leading a guided life. The energy, the grace, the connection, the God element is flowing through us. And that's what sustains us. I think Dr. Bob would have liked that in terms of keeping the thing simple, you know what I mean? So it's like seeing it from the 30,000-foot level. Oh, this is what happens. You know, you got to connect, you've got to correct, and then you got to lead a directed life.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
And it's simple, and it's also one aspect of it is it's not compartmentalizing anything.
You need all 3.
And I think that's what's being touched on here, is that weak AA, if you will, or cafeteria style AA, if you will, is to compartmentalize it.
Right.
And if you were to look at this thing from like they do time lapse of of a flower or something, where it's like, growing up, and then the seed, it's the flower head appears and then it opens, and you see the whole process like over weeks or something in a matter of a couple of seconds. It's a fascinating thing. If you were to look at this movement, which came out of the Oxford group, in a time-lapsed kind of way, the whole idea was it was your whole life. It was everything. And obviously we had to compartmentalize the thing down to alcohol. But in the early days when they were closer to the Oxford group, they saw this thing. But the alcohol was the thing that got you into the door of this way of life. And then you were supposed to not compartmentalize this program, right? It wasn't supposed to be compartmentalized to the problem of alcohol.
Yeah.
It was this whole life, right? This is the ladder is about awakening.
Yeah.
You don't just like, I'm going to awaken in the part of myself that relates to alcoholism. It's like, it was to be our whole lives, our whole selves.
And they got them through what became the steps quite quickly.
Yes.
Because you need what's available at the end of the ladder. Get up the damn ladder.
Yes.
Don't sit on rung 1, 2, and 3 for 6 years.
Yes, and I think that's because there's an understanding. Prior to this podcast, was talking to one of the persons, very sweet gal from Texas, had reached out to me after listening to this podcast, and little shout out to her. We were talking about the subject of Father Dowling's encounter with Bill, and Bill is in this really difficult situation. He's fighting over AA. They're going through this, again, the tension of the different factions and all of that. From a secular standpoint, it looks like a bunch of stupid arguing and whatever. And the divine providential part of it is something unbelievable. Is the seed is bursting forth, and it's coming out and growing into something. They can't see it. It's like trying to witness the growth of your own child. You can't. It's too close to you. And you have your neighbor comes over, wow, I can't believe how tall you've gotten. They're so close to this thing. Anyway, Dowling bursts into the scene and says to Wilson, Wilson's like, am I ever going to be satisfied in this thing? And he snaps back and says, no, the spiritual thirst that you have is not going to be satiated, but it certainly will never be satiated with booze. It is a divine aspect. You're never going to be satiated with it. And I think of very much, this phrase out of, Christ's case where he says, I thirst, like we do thirst. You get some kind of nourishment, if you will, from this way of life. But it doesn't mean that you're ever going to be fully satisfied. I was never satisfied with alcohol. Right? Like every time I did that route, I always thirsted, if you will, more. It gave me less and I wanted more. In a weird way, the spiritual life is the same thing. I'm never satisfied with it. I always have a need to keep climbing up that ladder. And yet there's something divine that's happening here. It is quenching something in me.
Yeah, and it's also drawing you deeper into it. I was reading Merton, his book on contemplation this morning, and this was exactly on this point. Temptations and the yearnings. This is a gift. We like to think we've got it. We've arrived. And that's really dangerous. So some element of ourselves needs to be called further up the ladder or on the spiritual journey.
Yes.
Amazing. It's exactly the same point. A note of warning needs to be sounded here. No analogy is perfect, and our latter image is no exception. The 12 steps need not, and in many instances must not, be taken consecutively. I thought this was interesting. Sometimes you hear people saying in AA meetings, I'm not ready to take the 5th step, so I don't see how I can do the 12-step work, helping others. This is nonsense. As a matter of fact, doing 12-step work is one of the very best ways to bring us to the point of readiness for some of the earlier steps that we are fearful about. And I would add the same thing is true for step 11. You don't wait for prayer and meditation till you've done, 1 through 9 or 10. You get to praying and meditating early in the process, and it helps you through those other steps.
Yeah, I would say like the sunburst of 12-step enlightenment, if you will, occurred in the soil of Bill's own despair, and it came as a prayer. He said, "If there is a God, may you show yourself."
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that prayer are the millions of people who are not drinking today that would have been killing themselves otherwise.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there's something to be said for despair.
Yes, and but it started off. The whole thing started off with the prayer. So if you're like, oh well, you can't pray until you've already done this step, that step, and the other step, and go and make your
Right.
amends, and then no, it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work
way.
that way. It doesn't work that
No.
way.
No.
Yeah. The steps, there's no question, there's great benefits to seeing this analogy of steps and ladders and all this good stuff. But you can get lost in that. If I have to do this and then that and then the other thing, and it becomes regimented. And you lose the whole idea of, I'm just trying to stay connected to God, and remove the blockages between him and me and other people.
Yeah, if you approach this thing with too fundamental of a headspace or too analytical or something like that, you will miss.
You'll miss it.
You'll miss out.
Yeah.
Yep. If you approach it too psychologically loosey-goosey, you can miss out. You can miss out on the other side too.
That's right. I think this is a brilliant article and so helpful for people to understand it in their own workings of their program.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. The best way to take the steps is to work the whole program, to practice these principles in all our affairs, as well as possible, one day at a time. Dr. Bob, AA's other co-founder, took the 9th step on his first day of sobriety, and Bill took the 4th and 5th before he was released from the hospital, where he was drying out when he had the spiritual illumination which led to the birth of AA. If you tend to be impetuous and are nervous about stupid application of the steps, check your own ideas on how to proceed with a wiser, more experienced friend, but then proceed. And part of that, I'd add, is bring it to your two-way prayer. See what God's guiding you to do.
I was just reading Tebow earlier, and he kept talking about surrender and the need to surrender and the continual need to surrender. And it's like, he was saying this cyclical thing in the program. You keep working inside the program, it's going to keep bringing you to that condition, to that state.
Right. You're going to fail. You're going to fail at applying these spiritual principles in your life. And in that failure becomes the seeds for your future growth.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep. That's exactly right.
So don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it. That, to me, that's the thing, what did Woody say in the program? Aim for progress, not perfection. But the truth is, if you take the Oxford group lead in this, the truth is aim for perfection and settle for progress.
Yeah.
And those
Yep.
two are very different.
Yeah, they are.
Very different. We must climb the ladder with humility, but not with timidity. No matter how frightening we may imagine the unscaled heights to be, in reality, nothing is to be feared like the muck of despair, chaos, and destruction at the base. For those who will climb, the promise is perhaps the most exciting of our age. We need not be consumed by fear, depression, obsession, and guilt. We need not settle for meaningless, unsatisfactory, second-rate lives. We need not remain earthbound. We have a simple and effective means of access to a higher life, a 12-rung ladder into the sunlit domain of spiritual awakening. It does not take great faith to work the 12-step program. Its power has already been demonstrated in countless lives, most of them quite hopeless, not to mention unspiritual. And the risks involved in the ascent are small. All we stand to lose is our misery.
This thing makes me think of Dr. Bob's statement about, if we go about this thing with half, I don't know what he used, zeal or intensity, that we did to get ourselves into the state of oblivion through booze,
Right.
we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, in a way, we were seeking different states of consciousness before through our addictive substance or behavior. We were looking for something, and we did go about it with great intensity, willing to, let go of family, work, friends, money, all of the things that we may consider to be of value to us at this moment. We were willing to gamble those things for what it was giving us. In return, we got insanity and sickness and misery and all the things mentioned here, unsatisfactory, second-rate lives. This program gives us the very thing that we thirst for: relief, release, connection, God consciousness, awakening, conscious contact, all these things that the program is pointing us. If we're on that ladder and we keep working towards it, then we will achieve a day at a time abstinence and whatever our hang-ups are, alcohol, drugs, whatever. The ascent, there is no real sacrifice in an objective sense except our misery. That's what we stand to lose here. The gamble is quite worth it.
Mm-hmm. And you're going to meet your ego on this journey. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. And it has a role to play, but it has to become willing and teachable, humble, all of those good things.
Yes. Submissive, obedient.
Yeah.
All those words that scared the crap out of us.
And meaningful. It's not just a mousy kind of recovery.
Yeah.
It's dynamic. It's fulfilling.
It's not our enemy.
No.
It's our friend.
Yeah. Well, okay, my friend, it has been wonderful spending some time with you. I put a link to All Addicts Anonymous in the show notes, and if you want to get in touch with Matt and harass him a little bit, he's always welcome to that. So have at it, guys, and do have the book that I've been working on for a couple of years, The Power of Two-Way Prayer. It's coming out July 1st, and I would encourage people to go to Amazon or wherever you get your books and check it out. It'll give you the history of two-way prayer. It'll kind of tell you how it got watered down and lost in the process. may really just be the thing that you need to kickstart your program. It has been for many.
I pre-ordered my copy.
Oh, bless your heart. Bless your heart. And I've pre-ordered 600 chickens from you, Matt. So, we're going to have a hell of a barbecue down here in Texas. Well, listen, thank you once again, Matt, for doing this. I know you're working on some literature too, and when that comes out, definitely want to have you back, and we'll take a peek at that and help people. Because I think what you're doing is really important work, and needs to get out there. Needs to get out there more than it has. So,
Yeah, thank you very much.
thank you for your work and
Yeah, thank you.
for your service, and thank you guys for listening. Hope this thing was helpful. By all means, keep coming back. Take care.